Welcome to The Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman. My co-host, Chris McNulty, is currently representing us at the Microsoft Business Applications Summit in Atlanta, Georgia. Don't worry, though. You'll hear from him later in the episode within our guest interviews. Today on the show, we're focusing on two topics with three great subject matter experts. At the recent SharePoint Conference 2019, Chris and I talked with Vesa Juvonen and Laura Kokkarinen about being developers and working with SharePoint. We also talked with Raymond of AvePoint across a number of different topics. While we are at the SharePoint conference, specifically for this episode, we wanted to gather voices that will get us more current on two things. That developer's perspective. How are we building things internally? And of course, how it's received externally. And we wanted to get a lens on our business partners. How are they taking to market what we're announcing? How they're helping their customers on the ground make sense of it all? And of course, just bringing great solutions and hitting the ground running. Coming up is our interview with Vesa Juvonen, Principal Program Manager with the OneDrive and SharePoint team, and Laura Kokkarinen, a developer who specializes in SharePoint, Office 365, and Azure.
Today on the Intrazone, we're sitting down with Vesa Juvonen and Laura Kokkarinen. Thank you so much for sitting down. We're here at SharePoint Conference. We know how busy it is, so appreciate your making time for us.
My name is Laura Kokkarinen. As you said, I'm from Finland, and I work at a consulting company called Sulava. And I'm a software developer specialized in development around Office 365 and Azure. I started working with SharePoint on 2011, but today I'm purely focused on the cloud, not doing any on-prem stuff anymore. And people probably know me the best from my blog, where I've been writing some thorough articles, and more recently also I've done some public speaking, and that's why I'm here also.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being on the Intrazone, and sounds like you've fully migrated to the cloud, so Laura in the cloud.
Yep.
And your buddy over here, who I've known for quite some time,
Yep.
From the same country, Finland.
Yep.
Finn that knows some development. Vesa, who are you, and
Yes,
what are you working on these days?
Yes, my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a Principal Program Manager in a OneDrive SharePoint developer platform. It's always weird to put the OneDrive there as well, but we combine the engineering.
There's a files API.
Yeah, that's true. It's the same API. That is true. Oh, you are a OneDrive? No. Now that I realize that. So I'm on the SharePoint engineering. My responsibilities are actually some of the features in the SharePoint framework, but there's Luca Pandinelli who's usually taking care of those. But it's more around my responsibilities, more around the community, open source projects, engaging with customers and partners, and making sure that we have a direct channel between the engineering towards the customers and vice versa.
So to give everybody a little bit more sense of who you are and what you focus on, I thought because we're at the SharePoint Conference 2019, we're at the tail end of it, end of May. Let's talk about one of the sessions that you were the most happy that you were delivering and you thought went the best or got the most value to the audience. So starting with you, Vesa, what was one of the sessions that you presented on topic-wise, and how did it go?
Yeah, so I was happy to have a keynote right after Jeff's keynote, which is always interesting. So Jeff actually mentioned in a keynote, this is going to be the best possible developer keynote in the world, which is like no pressure. Okay, Jeff?
What, Jeff Teeper setting you up for failure? No, success.
Success. Always. But we had a really nice kind of a setup. So I was kind of the host doing the intro slides and all, and then we had 4 demos. So we had Luca Pandinelli, so from my team, SharePoint Framework development team, dropping by showing SharePoint Framework and the Fluid Framework together, really cool stuff. Then we had Kathy Du from my team as well, talk about the modern portals and experiences there and how to extend the modern portals built on SharePoint Framework. Then we had Brett Lyonsdale from Lightning Tools, showing their ISV solution, and also Chris Johnson from Razorfish. Hyperfish. How do
He's razor slick.
Yeah, that's
CJ's
true.
razor slick, working for
Absolutely.
Hyperfish.
So Hyperfish showing their tooling, which is basically built on using SharePoint Framework, but then you can use SharePoint Framework tooling also in Microsoft Teams, which is really the big thing, because you implement once and then you can use it in multiple platforms.
That's nice.
That went really well. It was really cool.
That's a good balance of people from Microsoft and people from outside Microsoft, and it's actually the same pattern of why we wanted to have you you, Vesa and Laura, on the same podcast to give that perspective of not just talking to somebody from Microsoft, but somebody who maybe has a nice perspective on what Microsoft is doing. And I just have to look under the table, not be creepy. Okay, I'm not really looking under the table, but I just want to know, do you speak on a podcast the same as you present without shoes? Do you have your shoes on?
I have my shoes on now.
Did you have your shoes off for the developer keynote?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. That's always a fun treat when people kind of catch that and they're like, does he not have shoes on? Finn people are crazy. So, Laura, one session that you had, tell us a little bit about what the topic was and how did it go?
Well, I only presented one session, and that was Microsoft Graph with Microsoft Teams. So what kind of operations there are on Microsoft Graph for Teams that developers can utilize when they build their applications or solutions for Microsoft Teams, such as SPFX, Teams tabs, and whatever automated processes they might want to create related to Teams. For instance, workspace provisioning and Teams provisioning is a really hot topic amongst customers.
So when people think about development for Microsoft Teams, do you think it first surprises them that it's an environment that can be developed? Or is it pretty common these days that a lot of surfaces throughout Microsoft 365, including Microsoft Teams, which feels like the new app on the block, has a development aspect to it?
Well, it's always a nice surprise that you can develop for it, but of course it is not as extensible as SharePoint Online, for instance, because you can't modify the UI outside of a single tab. So it's still somewhat limited compared.
Which is actually an interesting discussion point because, like Laura said, Teams is not as extensible as SharePoint Online, but then on SharePoint, we're all the time getting feedback on that modern SharePoint has to be more extensible, more customizable.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting discussion always with customers.
Well, I know back in Ignite 2018 really is when we started to talk about what you can do in SharePoint from a customization perspective can be brought into Teams.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the two-way value. What you can do in Teams can be brought into SharePoint as a full-page app, if that's a okay way to describe it. But let's stay on the topic of Microsoft Teams for a little bit. I think with what you're showcasing from a developer's perspective, you mentioned the Teams templates. Can you describe a little bit about what a Teams template enables and then what developers should be thinking about when they're thinking about building JSON for Teams templates?
The JSON templates, they are related to the latest operation on Microsoft Graph for provisioning Teams. So there's 3 operations. The Teamify that you can use when you want to just add the team functionality to an existing Office 365 group. And then there's cloning. So it's the same one as what you can do through the UI. So you take another team and make another one like it. And then the third one is only available through Graph. And in that, you insert the JSON template that has all the configurations that you want to do for the team in the HTTP request body. And in that, you specify what kind of a team you want to create. So it's kind of nice. It gives you more control as a developer to what stuff is in there. Customers can't edit the template so easily. And also there's no visible team cluttering the team's UI when you're using the JSON template.
So when you hear that, Vesa, and you hear, obviously there's a big swell of people looking into Teams, wanting to use it more, developers wanting to jump in on that. I know a lot of our partners are thinking, how can they help support and promote Teams? What does that mean from a P&P perspective? And maybe take a moment to describe a little bit about what P&P is to our audience and what role Teams is playing in P&P these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So the P&P comes from words of patterns and practices, and this actually originally was a grassroots effort which started as collecting samples and patterns for the audience, and then gradually it extended to be much bigger than we ever thought of. And nowadays, the P&P initiative, which is a virtual team of community members, MVPs, and internal Microsoft employees, owns the SharePoint developer story and parts of the Microsoft Teams developer story as well. Now that we can use SharePoint framework, first of all, to extend Microsoft Teams. That's one discussion point. But then also the one of the most used capabilities in the P&P ecosystem or in the open source projects is the P&P templates. And the P&P template is basically a definition of what you want the engine to provision for you. So you're able to actually create definitions of multiple site collections and site different designs and themes. But now they're starting from May release of the P&P engine. Thank for Laura, actually, for the implementation on those parts. You can actually integrate themes inside of the template as well. So think of this as a one file, which I can send for you, Mark, as an example in email, and say, hey, apply this definition to your tenant, and then you will have multi-site collection, hub sites, and all of those automatically defined, custom branding, example content if needed, and then theme structures which have custom channels and tabs pointing back on the SharePoint, with column formatting and list formatting automatically defined. So this way, people have either starting points to start creating additional infrastructures or intranet structures, or if you're a consultant or in pre-sales, that's like the best possible thing ever. I have an engagement gig tomorrow. I want to have a cool setup which is demonstrating the best possible sides of SharePoint and Teams. You apply one template, you're good to go.
So what's interesting this year at SharePoint Conference, we recall last fall, we had the SharePoint Lookbook and its online equivalent, helping guide people towards principles of design. And this year, we've advanced that into becoming the SharePoint provisioning site, which is something everyone's been really excited about and asking questions. But for the percentage of our audience that hasn't heard about it yet or knows what it is, can we ask you to kind of expand on what is the provisioning site and why we have it?
Absolutely. So I kind of went to the trap with Mark's question because I think he was concluding on this direction, but then I took the developer and technical approach on this one, which is actually behind of the scenes as well. So as part of this spring, we released it's currently still in preview. We are still polishing the edges and all of that, but it's a provisioning service. It is currently in the provisioning.sharepointbmp.com address, and it's for tenant administrators. It will be for other users in future as well. But basically what you can do with the service is that you can have a look on the lookbook designs and provision to your tenant or any other tenant in the world.
So basically you can browse a catalog of what's available and say, I want a site like that.
Yes.
And you click
a
something
button.
And 3 weeks later, it arrives in the mail?
Well, luckily, it's much faster than that. So, but basically, yeah, so oversimplifying things, obviously depending on our audience as well. But really, the key value proposition of this one is that you have a catalog of sites, cool-looking sites, which are based on the lookbook designs. You select a site from the catalog and say, I want to have this in my tenant. One click of or two click of a buttons, you define a URL where you want to put that. Click a button, it will provision that site collection or multiple site collections for you, which are looking like the lookbook sites with example content. And it takes like 1.5 minutes to 4 minutes to 10 minutes, depending on a template which you're selecting.
Forgetting the fact that I've used this and tested this myself as well. Let's pretend I haven't. What's an example of a kind of site that someone might find in provisioning that they could add into their own environment?
Well, there's multiple welcome page templates. So example welcome page layouts. These are templates and example sites which we used actually in the live keynote demos in Ignite 2018, which is actually pretty cool. Because this is a classical request from all of the customers is that, well, you're always demonstrating cool looking sites. Why can't I have those in my tenant? And now you can. We use those. Then there's a give site, brand site, new employee HR site, Then there's the leadership site, which is for the CXO level, with some example content and structures as well.
And so these are all the samples from the lookbook, which I think give people a good sense of, hey, before we really commit to investing a full-blown modern intranet on SharePoint Online, let's look, and they're functional too. Like if they wanted to leverage the templates and put in their own content, that's very possible.
Yes.
I know one of the bigger things that we announced a little bit ago, originally called Microsoft Learning Services. What they talk about at the SharePoint conference show, they now brand it as the Microsoft Learning Paths.
Yes.
And that's a pretty serious template that's going to be delivered through the provisioning.
Correct. It's again in the provisioning service. There's a Office 365 Learning Paths. Right?
Yep.
And inside of that template, it is based on the BMP templating engine from a technical perspective, but you don't actually need to worry about technology. It's magical. Well, of course it's magical. It's BMP. Now, but what's inside of the template is also some custom web parts developed for that particular sample or solution. Which actually provides then additional value if you can provision that to your tenant, and you can use that for a kind of knowledge base usage, right? finding guidance and how to drive adoption of Office 365 inside of your organization.
Cool. Well, I know that team is looking forward to getting that to beyond preview. I know
Absolutely.
they're working hard with you to get the provisioning right.
We're working closely with Caruana on
So
this stuff.
when you think about some of these design languages and
Yep.
surface areas where you're guiding people to go with the SharePoint framework maturing and certainly development patterns,
Yep.
what might be some of those lessons learned or things that we want people to do first?
Well, obviously the React, Laura knows this already, so I don't need to actually explain this to Laura, but obviously for the listeners, absolutely. So the React was the chosen framework for us as a SharePoint engineering, because at the time we needed to make a decision, and that was the only framework which was actually suitable for the way we built solutions, or where we built the first-party experiences using SharePoint framework. And as part of this work, when we move into this modern experiences, we released Office UI Fabric and Office UI Fabric React controls, which any developer can use to make their web parts look exactly in line with the first-party web parts, which is, by the way, an awesome add-on value, because and it also shows that it's really safe to bet on SharePoint framework, because we actually built our own stuff using SharePoint framework as well. Plus, it's really safe to bet on React, because Microsoft built their experiences on React as well. And then we also have a separate set of PMP React controls, which are further increasing the productivity of the developers. So as a developer, you don't need to worry about how do I get to the taxonomy service to show a list of taxonomy terms, which you can use for filtering. All of that is taken care of for you as a reusable controls. So you can just kind of in the future, hopefully at some point, you can just almost like a track and drop bits and pieces and reusable controls and make your web parts potentially. Now you still need to do that in code, but if you use React, we give you a lot of reusable assets, which will help you.
That's the reason why I really want to learn React for this project that I have coming up, because I want to use those controls.
It's interesting, if you think about our community, like a lot of our focus has been on modernizing the skill set as we've gone from on-prem to cloud, and we've moved from .NET to SharePoint framework and so forth. And that's definitely one direction things are moving in. But there's another constituency, people who have spent most of their careers using tools like Ruby or writing in Lightning, or coming from a pure Angular environment. What are the things that you find are helpful to keep in mind as you're taking non-traditional Microsoft developers and introducing them to things like SharePoint framework and Office 365 and the capabilities that we have on platform there?
It is actually pretty close. 3 years when we announced SharePoint framework. Originally, it was a May event back in 2007. Is it then 3 years? 2006? I don't know. Maths, I don't know.
May 4th, 2016.
Thank you. As part of this journey, one of the key objectives for us in engineering was actually enable the non-SharePoint developers to be able to adjust or to be used as a SharePoint developer, because you don't actually need to be, in quotes, a SharePoint developer anymore. It's about being a web developer. And having this, the SharePoint framework using industry standard tooling, Node and NPM and all of that will help on this journey. And basically, because there's no SharePoint isms, like I said in the presentations as well. It's just basic web development. And what's great about that one is a two-way street. If you are already a web developer, you can develop now on SharePoint. If you are not, if you're a classic SharePoint developer, you will become as a general web developer.
What do you mean SharePoint-isms? It's totally obvious. SP Web is a site. SP Site is a site collection. We make it crystal clear.
Should we talk about the site definitions and on it XML files and feature XML files? Yeah, it brings back memories. Sure.
So, Laura, if we go on that trend of looking sort of beyond what was the Microsoft PhD that you had to have to know how we expected people to develop, what are some of the benefits for people that know web development, and as they start to develop against Microsoft technologies, what is the value of being more of an open source, open approach to development?
Well, SPFX web parts require you to know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you know already those if you have been doing anything for the web. So it's not like you need to learn a new language or anything. You can just use the same stuff that you have been using so far if you have built anything browser-based.
Do you see out in the community where people might have thought, SharePoint's not for me because it wasn't open, and now maybe they're looking at it and saying, actually, I can develop for SharePoint because I have the tools required without having to go learn a very, very specific thing in the past that we required?
I think among some people, SharePoint has a little bit bad reputation from the on-premises times.
Oh yeah.
But
Go
it's
figure.
but it's slowly changing, and I think people are a lot more excited to build SPFX.
What was interesting in the past, well, for these few years of a journey on SharePoint Framework is also that we've had quite a few podcasts as a general JavaScript development podcast approaching us and being kind of interested on, hey, this is a new opportunity. Because SharePoint has a massive, and including Microsoft Teams, it's a massive enterprise opportunity for developers to actually offer their web parts and widgets and functionalities and sell them potentially. We're still in progress of really truly finalizing the store story for SharePoint Framework, but it's in the top of mind section right now in the roadmap slide. So it is coming, and that will then enable random, let's say not random, but JavaScript developers outside of the classic Microsoft ecosystem offer also their functionalities for this massive enterprise opportunity.
If that is an outlet, you just made me think one of the challenges we had, and actually, in fact, why this podcast exists, is how can we reach new ears?
Yep.
We love to speak to people that love and have been fans for a while, but it's also always a challenge to get beyond the fan base or to get beyond people that have been using it for a while, to get new ears, because a lot of people use our technology, but not a lot of people are up to date on everything that we're doing because they're not plugged into that channel. But with those people from the JavaScript community reaching out to you, have you seen a change in sort of amount of people that may not be asking about SharePoint, but eventually building through that community and now working with Microsoft technology differently than the past?
One step at a time. So this is well, it's just those things then that let's say the bad reputation what SharePoint has from the past has, let's say, alienated some of the developers because it had the SharePointisms and everything else, and it freaked out people. It's like I don't want to learn what are these XMLs? Come on, give me. And I want to be on this open source world, and even in the open source world, Microsoft used to have a kind of a bad reputation. Nowadays, the world is changing. It's changing rapidly, and there's a lot of growing interest on the enterprise development. And it's really, I would say, it really comes down on the opportunities as well. Us as a Microsoft, we've grown to be much more open, and then we need to be more visible in this non-Microsoft world of explaining the opportunities for the developers, which are in this massive ecosystem what we have. Because reaching out, I think it was actually in the dev keynote we mentioned that there's 1 billion users under the Microsoft 365 umbrella. 1 billion users, and that's 1 billion potential customers
Big
for the
opportunity.
functionality. Yeah.
And big responsibility.
Yes, but I think we need to improve our messaging. Absolutely, we need to be more bold, being present, and then it's all about repeating, being constant, and being there where those people are, and explaining this opportunity for them.
One thing that's really important to watch, at least for me, is that Azure continues to add platform services over time. I personally spent a lot of time with Cognitive Services and what we're doing there. Do you think that a SharePoint developer these days can ignore what's going on in Azure and stay completely within the Office realm?
Just for everybody on the podcast here, they're both very durably and heavily shaking their heads.
Yeah. So do we need to answer? No, it's just
The answer is no.
I know. I'm guilty of sort of leading the witnesses.
No. But it's a good discussion topic. Absolutely.
So the follow-up question is, with the no, why?
Please raise your right hand.
Well, with SPFX, you can only build client-side solutions, and if you ever need to have something on the server side, you need to call Azure and have your background logic in there. And if you, for instance, want to connect to a database, you can't do that from the SPFX web part directly. You need to call an API, and from that API, a database, things like that. And also, workspace provisioning, if you have anything a bit more complex, you might want to have that running as a Azure function or a web job in Azure.
It's interesting. I also do a lot of work with Power Platform and Power Apps and Flow, and Azure Functions plugs an awful lot of gaps that people need to bring custom solutions in.
Yeah.
How much do you see SharePoint developers overlooking some of those Azure tools like Power Apps and Flow in their toolkit?
Azure tools like Power Apps and Flow. Can we actually say that Power Apps and Flow are Azure tools?
It's well, we're one
Talk to
Microsoft,
Scott
right?
Guthrie and team. They would like you
That's
to say
true.
it
That
way.
is fair. That is fair.
Yeah, I mean, one of my rules is no one cares which side of the highway
That's true.
builds your tools at Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't matter, but in terms of people sometimes have blinders to the
Yeah.
technology that they know and they don't look left to right.
Well, so for us, if you think about, again, SharePoint framework, it's mature enough already, and it is, we keep on polishing that and maturing that. But one of the relatively recent capabilities which were released was the access to Microsoft Graph, first of all, but then also getting securely calling an Azure Web API from the SharePoint framework. And that's like the holy grail of SharePoint Online, because now you can execute or call an web API securely, which is hosted in Azure, and then you get access on artificial intelligence, machine learning, LOB data, even connecting directly to on-premises from the front page of your SharePoint Online portal. That's amazing. And there's a lot of interest on this one, absolutely, among the SharePoint developers. And also, if you're kind of come from the SharePoint background, you love working in the Azure because that's just sheer sharp, potentially, or you can use Node.js as well. But it's more natural for some people to go to the Azure and concentrate on backend rather than the front end, which is the SharePoint framework.
And also probably speeds up page load times if you have
And
less
yeah,
logic.
yes, exposing the page loading times are much faster when you put the long-running operations there and caching there and all of that. It's really around selecting the right tools for the right usage, rather than always saying, hey, SharePoint framework is the solution. No. Let's think about when the Flow is the right solution, when the Power Apps is the right solution, when the Azure is the right solution. There's quite a few kind of considerations here and there, but there's no black and white definition for what's right or wrong, because every single customer case is unique.
Right. One of the things that we've talked about this week, we very much know we need to get it shipped and out the door, is the ability to be able to use site scripts and provisioning in SharePoint framework to be able to tap into Power Platform and provision flows and Power Apps in a much more seamless fashion. It's coming. We disclose it this week. We know it can't come fast enough, but I'm looking forward to it myself.
Yeah. So I think we can move the conversation into, you've been giving us a lot of answers to our questions, but what are some of the questions that you're all hearing? We'll start with Laura. Laura, what's your most frequently asked question that you're getting this week here at the conference, or just in general? What are people kind of unclear about, and then what do you provide them as the answer?
Usually people have just been asking where I'm from.
Laura, where are you from?
I'm from Finland, Kuopio.
Any specific development question? If you're opening the doors to Teams and Teams templates, is there a question there that people are asking frequently?
No.
What's the most frequently asked question about cats? Because on your profile for Twitter, it says you love cats. Is there any cat question?
What breed my cat is?
Oh, perfect. Let's go with that
It's
one.
a ragdoll.
Ragdoll.
Yeah.
Very nice. How old?
6 years.
6-year-old ragdoll. Very nice.
Vesa.
You have cats too.
I have cats too, 2 cats and a dog.
2 cats and a dog.
That was not the question, though. What's a question you've been hearing a lot this week that you'd like to answer here on the show?
Well, I think people come back on the modern portals and branding capabilities on modern portals. So what's possible, and will they support master pages at some point? That's a relatively typical question. People are kind of interested in moving to the modern, but then they need to realize, then start to thinking, okay, what can I do from here?
So in a sentence or two to give the answer, what you commonly say?
Well, master pages are not supported in modern. They will never be supported in modern. There are technical and operational and reasons which customers we actually want to, let's say, safeguard customers by taking the customer master pages scenario away. The modern will support branding options, so you are able to provide logos and colors and pretty soon fonts. You're able to add widgets, but in a safe way, because the custom master pages actually wasn't a safe way, and quite a few customers, let's say, hurt themselves by going that route in SharePoint.
Terrific. Mark, what's a question you've been getting
So
asked this
on the
week?
topic of development, I will just tell you, nobody asks me developer questions. But because I focus on sites, team sites, communication sites, similar question to what you were saying about portals, but more from the team site perspective, they always want to know, can I basically either further configure or customize a team site. And eventually the question leads into answering things like you've provided answers for Teams and the different web parts. Yeah. And I always land on, really, I think what I've probably just echoed from listening to Vesa. The great way to think about it is you can build your own custom web parts. You can extend the page from the top and bottom, so footer and header. And if you think about from a branding perspective, bring your own theme, customize your theme. But an area where I've just gotten a lot of questions because I used to own the feature was site designs, which I know we're more focused on just describing them as templates, and what you can do with them so that when you, from mostly an IT perspective, to just tell people to be able to be, when you turn the create site option on, you're not out of the ballpark to be able to say, when you create the site, I'm going to configure it for you. Sure. And it's not going to be Microsoft's out-of-box thing. It's not going to be this wildly customized thing that's going to be hard to manage over time, but it's going to be a well-defined programmatic way to create sites in a defined IT-approved way, but not to affect the user. The user is just creating a site and they get their site. But it can be much more different than the out-of-box experience, configured to the business needs that have been injected. What is your most frequently asked question?
So the question I've been getting a lot in the last 24 hours relates to my Power Apps and Flow session yesterday, which was what got the biggest reaction from the audience? And I would say there's two parts to that. After the fact, the feature that got a huge reaction online certainly is the ability to do custom document generation from a template inside Flow, being able to propagate things into a Word template directly from items you're picking up out of a list. The one that got the reaction that warms my inner geek heart, because I thought this feature was so esoteric we didn't even pause for applause, is query delegation. So if you have lists and libraries with 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 items, you can't send all of those down into a Power App mobile application. But being able to apply a filter and have the service execute the query. Query delegation opens up a huge range of data sources that you can use for your applications. And there was spontaneous applause in the room. So we knew we had the right people there.
Yep. Very nice. Well, thank you for your FAQs. Thank you for, of course, providing a lot of information about development, what it looks like today with Teams, what it looks like today for P&P, and of course, very excited to see when you go public with the GA of the site provisioning, and certainly more and more templates to come. Yep. But on behalf of myself, thank you for entering the IntraZone.
Thank you for having us. One thing I have to say, thank you guys for taking the risk of having two Finns in a room, because that typically doesn't generate that much discussion.
You could have just ended up with yes and no
yes
answers.
And no. Oh, we're very persistent. We don't take yes or no for an answer. Or no, yes.
Yes.
No. Do we?
Yes, we have no bananas.
Chris and I sat down with Dux. You might know him as Meet Dux, and we chatted with him about a few things, about being a Microsoft partner, both taking the Microsoft message out to customers, but also landing great solutions and scenarios with customers with AvePoint technology. We also asked him about what he liked best that he heard in the SharePoint conference keynote. So you'll hear his take on home sites, Yammer innovation, and Microsoft Search. And then we got into a great topic about how he began training trainers with tips on how to be a rock star presenter. So definitely stay tuned for that. All right, we are here with Dux. Do I just go by your only one singular name, sort of like Madonna?
Or Prince.
Dux.
Sting. Dux, yeah. My name is Dux, and glad to be here.
Yeah, so you are on Twitter as Meet Dux, so people probably know you there. People know you obviously as the CMO of AvePoint. But take a moment, tell us a little bit about who Dux is, what you do at AvePoint, and then, of course, let's get into what does AvePoint do.
Fantastic. Well, first and foremost, thank you for this opportunity, Mark, Chris. I've been longing to be a part of this show. My name is Dux Raymond Sai. I serve as a CMO of AvePoint, but been very privileged to be a part of this industry over 15 years. Also grateful to be a Microsoft Regional Director and MVP. And at AvePoint, we help customers migrate, manage, and protect their data in Office 365, but also if they still have on-prem investments with SharePoint, we certainly help them with that as well.
AvePoint's been a mainstay of the SharePoint community and the Office 365 community for a while, and it's great to be sitting down here in Las Vegas. And I know over the past couple of days, people have been reflecting on, 5 years ago at the Venetian or 10 years ago at Mandalay Bay. I do think a lot of folks may be kind of anchored in the notion of AvePoint going back to its AvePoint provides DocAv and a platform for being able to provide migration and management services. Bring that forward 5 or 10 years from that understanding. What is AvePoint today?
Thank you for asking that, Chris. It's just like Microsoft, we went through this phenomenal transformation, not only from a business perspective, but also from a technology perspective. Understanding what the customer needs are, where everything today is powered by the cloud. So just like what Microsoft has done, I would say over 5 years ago, we're invested heavily in Office 365. We did the same. In fact, our most popular technology suite of technologies is AvePoint Online Services. It's essentially a cloud-based platform that helps customers extend the capability and how they can manage and govern Office 365. So today, really, certainly we still love and support all of our SharePoint customers, but we're far beyond that. We help govern Teams, for example. We back up Microsoft Dynamics 365. We have technologies that can help customers make sure they maximize their Azure usage. So we're all in the Microsoft Cloud, and we want to make sure we support our customers who've made that investment as well.
I love the notion of, we always have thought of a really strong partner as somebody who keeps up with Microsoft and then leads the charge in the specific areas. But also what you're saying is the keeping up with customers. What is the customer demand? No matter where they're at, they're always wanting to move to that next thing. So nice to see you moving in that direction and continuing to move that way.
AvePoint is a relatively large organization, but smaller than Microsoft. And, I think anytime Microsoft has a certain weight and mass that makes it harder for us to be instantly responsive to an emergent customer need. And AvePoint, as I understand, you also have a significant number of folks who provide consulting services who can kind of be that front line of being able to listen for here's what our customers need and here's how we're going to respond to it.
Well, definitely. So as an organization, we're about over 1,500 people around the world. Yeah. In fact, 2/3 of that are technologists. I think at one point we were speaking with somebody from Microsoft, and again, this is just what I heard, is we have the most experts outside of Microsoft around the SharePoint stack and Office 365 stack. And definitely customers are always top of mind. So for example, if they have a need around a capability that's not existent in Office 365 and we don't have it in our technology, and if it's something that we feel like other customers can benefit from it, we'll turn it around, and we've done it as fast as 1 week through our cloud platform, make it available right away for customers.
We're at the SharePoint conference, SPC 19 here in Las Vegas, and today Jeff Teeper, Seth Patton, and team unveiled a huge amount of innovations and what we're working on. And I'm certainly, from a partner perspective, there's a lot of things hopefully that you are excited about, but I also love to hear what you were just as an end user that have been using this technology for such a long time. What were the keynote announcements that really rang true for both you and your company?
So, boy, it's just a phenomenal keynote. I love the fact that a lot of the innovations that I thought about 5, 6, 7 years ago were impossible, where everything has to be custom coded, that's here and easy. But I would say my top 3 announcements would be, first and foremost, obviously SharePoint home sites.
Yeah.
I mean, people always crave for that, not only visually appealing interaction and interface with an intranet or a landing page, but also the easy capability to do that. I mean, back in the days, I'm sure, Chris, you would remember SharePoint 2007, 2010, you have to muck around with master pages and go to the 14 Hive and mess stuff up, and then you can't even update it easily. But with home sites, not only is it beautiful, but pretty much anybody can make it beautiful. So that's one. I think the second innovation that I really am excited about is the innovations in Yammer. I know they talked about a lot of stuff, but the fact that, again, streamlining company engagement with things like the Q&A. And more importantly, I saw Dan tweet about no code using a bot to automate answers, frequently asked questions.
Yes, the big question was, can I bring my dog to work? And the bot went out and found that, yes.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that because for us, as an organization, we love Yammer, we use Yammer, but certainly, time and again, we may have new people at AvePoint, they ask the same question, which is okay. But imagine having an automated response, being able to say, oh, here's who you talk to for expense reimbursement form and whatnot.
Right.
And then the third innovation, I would say, is Microsoft Search. I mean, we've heard a lot about Microsoft Search in the last year. I think back at Ignite, there were demos, but finally it's coming into fruition. And Naomi's demo is just amazing. So those are my top three from Keynote.
Home sites are definitely, if you think about where the ecosystem was 5 years ago, it's barely a blip, all of these portal-in-a-box, internet-in-a-box companies. How would you advise a customer who's looking at this burgeoning ecosystem and Microsoft's announcements and how to make sense of that one?
Here's what I would say and advise customers, right? Again, it's the whole better together. What's your goal? What's your business need? So first, we want to talk about that. For example, for something like a media company, where very precise look and feel and brand and standards and all that is important. Certainly, home sites can provide a lot of what they need, but if there's something specific that it's above and beyond what home sites offers, absolutely, there's a huge, like you said, growing partner ecosystem around elevating and enhancing the look and feel of SharePoint Online as an intranet. I think about it akin to the public internet, the public web. I mean, think about all these companies now like Squarespace and Wix, and just not only making it easy for you to build these sites, but making it really beautiful, responsive, and mobile ready. So my answer to customers would be what their needs are, but frankly, based on what I saw today, it fulfills 90% of what a lot of the ask that customers are looking for.
We hope that we've given you a lot of stuff now as you're going around the world, to talk about, not only to land what's already in market, but what's coming soon. But we actually want to transition a little bit of the conversation to hear about what you're doing literally around the world. I've been watching your videos, your tweets, and all your posts that reference that I'm here. Where have you been recently? But also mostly, what are you talking about and what are you sharing and hearing as you're traveling the world?
So boy, 2019, I mean, we're only in May or June. It's been an amazing year. I'm so thankful I get to see the world and meet people, but we're working closely with Microsoft, not only from a corporate perspective, but we're working closely with a lot of the regional colleagues from Microsoft to help ensure customers maximize their investment in Office 365. Primarily work with a lot of the customer success teams in Modern Workplace. And what I do is I pretty much host workshops to customers around the world and really show the goodness of Office 365, specific to things like Teams, SharePoint Online, and Yammer. Talk about the idea of, other than the technology capability, but really focus business use cases. How can they reap the value of Yammer, for example, from helping drive leadership engagement, drive culture in the company? Talk about the purpose and how SharePoint is really the content fabric of Microsoft 365 now, where in cases, for example, like Teams, it serves as that hub where, traditionally prior to Teams, we had that Teams site, everybody worked there, put the documents, and it still serves the same purpose, but with the deep integration now with Teams and SharePoint, it's even better. So I talk a lot about that. And then more importantly, talk about the broader thinking around how do you position these things, because I'm sure you get this from customers. While all this are great, but how do we drive sustainable adoption? And I always harp on this, right? The word adoption is not enough. You have to think about sustainability. And along that lines, which naturally comes to it, is talking about governance as well. If you want people to adopt, similar, the analogy I use is, we live in a great country, we have freedom, but for people to adopt and follow the rules we have the Constitution, we have laws. So the same idea is, how do you make it easy for people to do the right thing? Office 365 is a great platform, but how much or how less, the boundaries we put up. So then I go talk about what Microsoft offers out of the box, what they can get through things like Azure ADP One, and then how we as AvePoint can help and support them as well. Mm-hmm. So it's been great. Last week I was in Australia, I was in Melbourne, Sydney, and Canberra. In fact, I want to highlight Canberra because Microsoft recently invested a local government data center for the Australian government, which is amazing. A lot of the government agencies are excited. I was advising them on thinking about how they migrate to SharePoint Online, in fact, and thinking about how they really consider compliant migration. There are certain things that they might need to protect. So we went through a lot of those great conversations.
Where would you say they were coming from? The data center opens up the opportunity for them to say yes.
Regulated customers, be it financial institution, government, and even, frankly, any other organization. What I'm finding is a lot of them are coming from file share, certainly, but also there's SharePoint 2007, 2010, 2013 still out there. Yep. You'd be amazed, especially with government organizations who's invested heavily. Still tons of 2007.
So, Dux, you talk about culture in an organization, and I think it's something that we can all start chatting about without ever really describing what it is. Could you help our listeners understand what is the role and nature of culture in an organization?
Thank you for asking, Chris. So to us at AvePoint, this is very near and dear to us. To me, culture means authenticity, right? Most of us spend most of our days and time at work with our colleagues, and there's conversations around, oh, this is your work life and your personal life. To me, no such thing exists. You have one life, right? So when we go back to culture at AvePoint, we have this culture really driving authenticity. And what does that mean? As part of our core values, our core value is around agility in everything we do. You alluded to this earlier. If we can help a customer, we do it as fast as we can. Another big part of our culture is our core value around passion. We're passionate in everything we do, regardless of who we are in the organization. And in fact, that's one of the metric when I interview people, I can tell if their passion would be in line with how we think of passion. And lastly is teamwork. We're an organization that's all over the world, but and across different departments. But if we can help each other out, regardless through small things or big things for the benefit of the customer and our own employees, we're all about it. So our culture is really driven by our core values, agility, passion, and teamwork.
Yep.
And one last thing I really want to say about culture is I want to kind of circle back to Microsoft. I think Microsoft to us is a great inspiration. I mean, no means no company is perfect, but what Microsoft is doing in helping drive diversity and inclusion, and it's not just lip service. It's not like Satya getting up on stage saying, internally we're doing all these kumbaya, which is great, but then it reflects on the investments Microsoft's doing on technology. I mean, there's tons of stuff out there around accessibility, on ensuring the products that's produced can help drive culture and improve organizations such as Yammer and whatnot. So, looking up to Microsoft as a big brother per se, there's still long ways for a lot of us, but I think it's a good first step forward.
So the next thing I thought we would kind of dive into, because we see you doing it all the time. You have what you do at AvePoint. You have obviously what you do for your customers on behalf of Microsoft, a lot of work. But you also just do a lot on behalf of other people that are working like you are as trainers, as speakers, to give them best practices. Just walk us through, A, why you started doing that, and then B, obviously now
Sure.
you're doing it, what it is that you're actually offering.
So I started my career as a assembler developer back in the early 90s. And I remember my very first opportunity to present, my boss came up to me and say, hey, I'm going to bring you to a sales meeting and make you pitch. So I went there and I pitched. It was so bad that the customer...
Hold on. Stop the tape. Did you say Ducks gave a bad pitch?
Very bad.
I don't believe it.
Very bad. And not only did we didn't get the business, we didn't even get a second meeting. It was that bad. And it dawned on me that I got to fix this. Like, I can't go on in life not being able to present. And that was my first job ever. I'm like, I'm just starting my career, and if this is the case, then I got to do something. So it became a mission of mine to improve my presentation and speaking skills. So through the years, I took some classes. I went online, watched a lot of videos on presidents, and just picked stuff up. And I actually put together a formula on how to put together presentations and continue to improve that. And then maybe a few years ago, actually, I was speaking with somebody at Microsoft and say, oh, you speak so well and present. I go, dude, you can do it. There's a formula. It's like, no. I go, yeah. So I shared it. I helped prep this person, and it worked. And then suddenly it's like, you should teach people. And then I had the opportunity to share on an MVP call this formula, and I'm open, if you need help. And that just kind of snowballed.
What would be one bit of advice you would give to our listeners about, you could be a better presenter if you would just...
One quick thing, you could be a better presenter if you would just limit the amount of content you present. There's a study, and I can share this if you guys want, that people only remember half of the stuff you said in 24 hours.
You're going to have to repeat that. I only caught the first part of what you were just saying.
And then after 48 hours, people only remember 25%. Long-term memory, they'll only remember 11%. I've seen slides where people just copied and pasted stuff from TechNet. So to me, you have to be very intentional of what you're showing on your slide, right? So I go through this formula of how many bullet points you should have, how many words, and it's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but if you don't do it well and make sure you convey the information people remember, limit the amount of information you present.
So I think maybe the new hashtag we can get started is Ducks hacking, because your growth hacking to become a great speaker was, hey, maybe I didn't get it right in the first time, but I'm going to work on it.
Thank you. And you can, the hashtag I use for this, I share all this little tips and tricks, is hashtag rockstarpresenter. Find it on LinkedIn and Twitter. I got to figure some hashtag nobody's using. So
we'll do it. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll definitely link to anything that you've got to point people in the right direction.
For sure.
Before we do a little wrap up, want to get back to AvePoint. And if there's anything big that you're all working on or any big notion that you want to get across.
Again, thank you for having me. These days, we're so excited as we work with customers to really help them make it easy for their organization to do the right thing. If I would simmer it down to that, that's what we do as an organization. Our technologies, especially now that customers are fully embracing the cloud, helps organizations operationalize governance. I know governance is such a daunting, big, scary word, but it shouldn't be. Apart from all the goodness that Microsoft offers to help govern things like provisioning of Teams or SharePoint or Yammer, managing information through a lot of the new investments, especially we saw today, and even managing information lifecycle. If they have to deal with retention, data expiration, all that, and if they need more, we can help with that. So we're all about making it easy for people to do the right thing, and I hope they check us out, avepoint.com.
Where can people go to learn more about your travels?
Look me up on Meet Ducks on Twitter. That's the best way. Or they can follow me on Instagram. I post travel pictures on Instagram, Meet Ducks. Definitely thank you again for having me and looking forward to our continued partnership and collaboration.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I'm immediately going to go probably cut about 3 or 4 of my slides for my afternoon talk.
Thanks.
That was our interview with Dux Raymond Tsai from AvePoint. Next, I'll be sharing important upcoming events in the SharePoint community around the world. One of the most amazing things about the SharePoint community is there's always a place and a time throughout the year and across the world to plug in, to meet other people, to get trained, to train. And in this context, the SharePoint community is both the attendee and the speaker. So let's talk about some of the upcoming events that are coming up. The biggest one that's happening all across the year is big because they're always happening, and they're very regional. I'm talking about SharePoint Saturdays. These are exceptional opportunities for users and IT and developers, of course, to learn from and engage with their local community. And the best part about it that we always love to emphasize, they are free. So if you want to learn about what's coming up, you can always visit spsevents.org to find a SharePoint Saturday near you. And specifically, coming up June 22nd, there are 2 SharePoint Saturdays. One in Madrid. You can follow at SPS_Madrid. And Philadelphia, if you follow at SPS_Philly. Then, following week on June 29th, there are 3 SharePoint Saturdays. The first one, Beijing, China. The second one, Pune, India. This is just east of Mumbai, and you can follow them at Pune User Group, PUNEUSERGROUP. And the third SharePoint Saturday on June 29th is in Vienna, Netherlands. You can follow the Dutch Information Worker Group Twitter handle, which is at DIWUGNL. SharePoint Saturdays, they're on Saturdays. Where should you be on a Saturday? A SharePoint Saturday. In August 19th to the 23rd, there's going to be the SharePoint Fest Seattle. You can go to their website, sharepointfest.com/Seattle. And what you can expect if you were to attend SharePoint Fest Seattle, there's going to be 2 keynotes. There are several pre-event workshops. There's about 150 plus breakout sessions. One of the things at the very end that we do is a Microsoft AMA, so get your questions ready, and a ton more. There's definitely something for everyone across SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Azure, BI, and I'm just going to add audibly ... That's because there's a ton of content at SharePoint Fest Seattle. Go check out their website, see what they've got listed. Follow them at SharePoint Fest on Twitter. Not too long after, August 25th to the 28th, is SP TechCon Boston. So if you're West Coast, SP Fest Seattle. If you're East Coast, this one is for you, SP TechCon Boston. This event, similar to a lot of our SharePoint community events, covers a wide range of SharePoint and Office 365 topics, along with a variety of half and full-day workshops, a Microsoft keynote, and 2 general sessions, plus so many choices each day across all products, workloads, and audiences, including IT, business, and dev. Visit their website at sptechcon.com/east or on Twitter at sptechcon. Looking a little bit later in the year, 2 big events. One is a Microsoft event. The other is a third-party event, not to miss. The big one for us, November 4th through the 8th in Orlando, Florida, is Ignite 2019. This is a place where you can connect with 25,000 people across 1,000 sessions on software development, security, architecture, and IT. There's a vision keynote from our Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, followed by technology keynotes to get the latest Microsoft product news from Microsoft technology leaders and featured customers. Go to Microsoft.com/ignite and on Twitter at @MS_ignite. And then to close out the year is the European Summit. This year it's in Prague, Czech Republic, December 2nd through the 5th. There are actually 5 keynotes with Jeff Teeper, Scott Hanselman, Alex Simmons, Miri Rodriguez, and Vesa Juvonen. There will be 4 days of content, 150 plus sessions, all ranging from 100 to 400 level sessions, workshops, and more. Go to SharePointEurope.com and on Twitter at EuropeanSP. But the most important thing is that is the SharePoint community doing what they do, sharing, listening, and providing feedback. That's what the SharePoint community is all about. Thank you to our guests, Laura Kokkarinen, Vesa Juvonen, and Dux Raymond Sy.
Check out our show page for links to all of what was discussed today and more. Go to aka.ms/theintrozone.
If you'd like to reach out with questions or feedback for the SharePoint teams, email us at theintrozone@microsoft.com or out on Twitter at SharePoint, at @mcashman, and at cmcnulty2000.
Tell all your friends and colleagues about the show. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks so much for listening. We are your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty, and you've been listening to The Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet.